On Dispatches, our new Prime Minister as you've never quite seen him before.
I probably think at the end of this evening it's completely defies him being Prime Minister.
And the search for his true intentions, now he's in charge. Over the last 6 months, Dispatches cameras have been travelling with him. Tonight, is there a Blair blueprint? If so, can it be delivered? Dispatches reporter Cam McRae investigates the man and his mission. Behind the mask, what can we expect from the BLAIR Project?
It's December 1996 and members of Sedgefield constituency Labour Party are holding a private fundraising dinner dance. And after dinner, a speech from the local MP.
I attended a conference abroad where there were all various great dignitaries. There was this rather well-turned-out woman in her late 50s who said to me, let me help you to some food from the buffet. So I went over and she helped me some food and she said, and who are you? And I said, I'm Tony Blair, the British Labour Party. And she said, oh, fine. And I said, and who are you? And she said, well my name's Beatrice. I said, oh. I'm afraid I did. I said, and what do you do? She said, I'm Queen, actually. It's really, you actually don't really recover in a gathering. It'll all change, of course, you know, once you get the power. These people tell you these little...
Well, he's been in power now for 6 days, and it's time to ask just exactly what will change. What will be revealed in the cold light of this new political dawn? What, in the newspeak of New Labour, is the Tony Blair Project? Our search for clues begins on the 26th of February last year, when around 100 people, mostly intellectuals and opinion formers, gathered for a private invitation-only symposium in this hall in King's College, London. They didn't really know what the meeting was about, except that it was to be addressed by the leader of the Labour Party, Tony Blair. It turned out he wanted to tell them about his project, his grand vision.
He talked about three areas that a modernising project would be concerned with. One of them was this package of institutional and constitutional reforms, which he termed a partnership with the people. It's what used to be called the democratic agenda under Kinnock and Smith.
But devolution, a Bill of Rights, reform of the House of Lords and other constitutional measures were already, officially at least, part of Labour's policy for government. It was the other two elements which were new and lay at the heart of Blair's radical vision. The first of these, the stakeholding economy, would represent a transformation of the way capitalism is run, effectively an alternative to traditional socialism which would offer everyone a direct stake in the functioning of the economy. The second key element, a one-nation society, was a vision of a socially cohesive Britain united by a system of mutual responsibilities. These, he made clear, were the obligations which came with the rights and opportunities implicit in a stakeholding economy.
It was received well. I mean, it was seen as a coherent package, and a lot of people who have only seen Tony Blair, classically on the telly, and seen him in his party manager role, saw a much more relaxed, open-minded person who did a very impressive question and answer session for 45 minutes without note. He won a lot of allies, if not friends.
Of course, this was long before anybody had envisaged the sheer scale of Blair's victory. And for many people there, it was the first real indication of just how grand was his vision. But then he had another surprise for them.
He said very, very clearly at this meeting that his reference point is what Thatcher did. If you consider Thatcher not in terms of the actual policies and their impacts, but in terms of a project for governing and for staying in government, and building a coalition of people and ideas. That's what I think Tony Blair is influenced by.
And so the Blair Project got underway, and we've been following him to see how it's fared.
Calling at Crewe, Stafford, Nuneaton, Watford Junction, London News.
That private symposium in London did show that, like Thatcher, Blair already had his mission. But it also showed that, again like Thatcher, he wanted a current of intellectual support behind him, generating the ideas to put his vision into practice. It did smack more than a little of a man who'd declared himself emperor and was now rather urgently looking for some clothes. But nonetheless, many were encouraged by the kind of things he was saying at that time.
I felt pretty optimistic, frankly, when Tony Blair made his stakeholding speech. I felt that at last New Labour had connected with a body of ideas that had an authentic kind of left or liberal tradition, and which actually did map out a way that was neither kind of old Labourist nor actually conservative. I mean, literally the famous third way.
But at the heart of the Blair vision lay an equation repeated like a mantra over the past few months.
In return for those opportunities, responsibility.
But in the reality of government, which will come first for the people in most urgent need of change? The opportunities or the responsibilities? The creation of the stakeholding economy or the clampdown on spending and welfare payments? This is Govan in Glasgow. It's also, surprisingly, where Tony Blair's family originally came from. So how did he end up so far removed from here? What experiences moulded his politics? What indeed can we learn about our future from his past? Alex Morrison knew Tony Blair's grandmother well. He remembers Tony Blair's father, Leo, when he joined the Young Communist League.
Mrs. Blair stayed somewhere about here.
Their house was just
building just about here.
Next to the Salvation Army Hall.
And the Young Communist League premises were just about that lamppost over there.
Leo was in fact the illegitimate son of two itinerant actors, but he was fostered to Mary Blair and her husband James, who worked in the Govan shipyards. Both were active in the revolutionary ferment of Red Clydeside.
What we've got to remember here is that in the 30s we had the consequences of the free enterprise system and the competition. And what did it leave us in Govan? A derelict Govan. We're still back at that situation with very nearly a derelict Govan, and there's no solution in sight.
So could the past which haunts Govan come back to haunt its long-departed grandson?
Knowing Mrs. Blair, who was a die-hard lifelong communist, I don't think she'd be very happy the way Labour is going now.
But Tony Blair was never to experience the realities which formed his grandmother's politics, because after the war, his father, Leo, set about reinventing himself, an operation his son was later to perform on the Labour Party. Leo became a lawyer and university lecturer, and then, in formal confirmation that he'd changed class, he joined the Conservative Party and dreamed, he has said, of becoming Prime Minister. This was the Leo that Tony Blair knew, the Leo who provided his early role model and encouraged him to study law. The dreaming spires of Oxford. Actually, the early 70s, when Tony Blair was here, were a turbulent time, but his response was far from typical. While others fought the university authorities or the police or the American war in Vietnam, Tony Blair committed himself to fighting the good fight. He was confirmed as a Christian. Here also, he met an Australian mature student called Peter Thompson, the first of the mentors of his adult life. Blair was about to discover many of the ideas he now claims lie at the heart of his project for Britain.
He came up with a fairly undeveloped understanding of politics, middle class, conservative background, and we were interested in a more Marxian analysis and how that related to Christianity.
Blair certainly never became a Marxist, but he entered enthusiastically into the philosophical and religious debates led by Thomson.
The way we saw it was the religious reference and the political reference was one and the same, and it was being expressed through the philosophy of thinkers such as Murray.
John McMurray was a Scottish philosopher and Christian who believed that people could only be defined in terms of their relations with each other. For him, friendship or close community was the most important human and indeed religious experience. Blair claims McMurray as one of his inspirations to this day.
He's basically still motivated by the same ideas that we had 20-odd years ago.
So does this mark the beginning of Blair's mission, his project? If so, it suggests that what lies at its heart is not a political programme, but his Christianity. A liberal Christianity, certainly, but one which translates politically into an attempt to recreate British society on the kind of model of a community envisaged by McMurray. It suggests that that is the basis for his call today for the creation of a moral society.
History will call it the decent society, a new social order for the new age of achievement in Britain. And these will be its principles. We will respect family life. We will develop it and encourage it in any way that we can, for strong families are the foundation of strong communities.
But would McMurray have recognised this vision? One commentator who's recently studied his work has his doubts.